Talking Point with Paul Hammond on UCB One.
Now, a new hymn has been written to mark what for many people will be an important event. It's to commemorate 60 years of Christian involvement in the campaign for nuclear disarmament. I know, CND, is it really relevant in this day and age? Is it something that's pertinent to us still? Well, in order to find out a little bit more about the celebrations, about the anniversary, but also about the ongoing voice of faith in this debate, I'm joined via the wonders of the interweb by Russell Whiting. He is from Christian CND. ChristianCND.org.uk is their website. And so 60 years on, Russell, what was it inspired Christians to get involved in CND in the first place?
So CND started a couple of years before Christian CND was founded, and Christians had been involved from the beginning, but it was thought at the time that there needed to be a distinctive Christian voice that could speak to the Christian community and the church community in the UK and make a very clear moral and biblical argument against nuclear weapons. And so it was thought at the time that the best way to do that was to start a separate organisation and kind of maintain strong links with CND, which continue to this day, but have that distinct faith voice.
And that key point about a biblical as well, because the world and his wife at the time were raising the moral arguments, and there were more than a few sort of humanist arguments being raised around the support of nuclear disarmament. What was the biblical perspective that the originators of your organisation believed was an important message?
So they, as we do now, were looking to the life of Jesus for how they wanted to interact with society. And I think when we read the New Testament, you see Jesus over and over again talk about loving one another. He talks about peacemakers being blessed. Throughout the book of Romans, Paul is talking about living peaceably with one another. And we face a choice now, as we did then. Do we do that through love and cooperation and friendship and building bridges, or do we do it by trying to threaten people with a weapon of mass destruction? And at the time, Christians believed that that was the wrong way to do things, and Christians have believed that for the past 60 years.
Did people understand at the time, though? Because there was I suppose there would have been an inclination 60 years ago, post-war, and with all that had been going on, especially in some sections of the church, that the responsible attitude was, rather than protest these things, but to support the government, rally round the flag, ensure that we were able to protect our future and keep ourselves safe and play a role in the world and all those sorts of things. It wasn't really understood that Christians would get involved in this, was it?
It wasn't certainly unanimous by any degree, and it's not unanimous today, and I wouldn't be so bold as to pretend that all Christians support our view. At the time, there was, I think, more of an understanding of the consequences of nuclear weapons, because we were only, 15 years away from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the people of Japan were still, as many of them are today, living with the consequences of those horrific bombings. But you're right, there was certainly an attitude among some that they believed that these weapons were going to keep us safe. They believed that they were going to help Britain maintain its leading role in the world. But I think the lessons of the past 60 years, you and I are talking in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic. The lesson of the past 60 years is that nuclear weapons really do absolutely nothing to keep us safe.
Yeah, although I suppose the fact that we have enjoyed peace for the best part of those 60 years, we haven't seen another global conflict in those 60 years, I suppose that does, that could be used to support their argument, couldn't it?
Well, I suppose, the absence of a all-out world war, obviously there's conflicts raging on around the world at the moment, and the UK has been involved in many and is still involved in many, and we've seen terrible loss of life on our own shores that nuclear weapons have done nothing to stop. But really, even if you did make the argument that in the 1980s they were a sensible idea, I think in the 21st century, they've certainly passed their use.
So what is the message for now then? Because we don't have the same number, we don't have the same proliferation of nuclear weapons around the world, do we? Is there still a relevance to the idea of a campaign for nuclear disarmament?
Well, we don't have as many nuclear weapons around the world, that's true, as at the height of the Cold War. There are still, the UK still has about 300 nuclear weapons. Each of those is about 8 times as powerful as the ones that were detonated in Hiroshima. So the UK by itself could destroy the planet many times over. And we are known as one of the smaller nuclear powers. For example, America and Russia have well over 10,000 weapons between them. And we've seen recently moves by North Korea and possibly Iran to develop their own nuclear weapon systems. Donald Trump has even been encouraging countries like Japan and Saudi Arabia to have their own. So I think although we perhaps have moved away from an imminent threat of them being used, as we had in the mid and early 80s, it's certainly the case that they're still around. And obviously, the more there are, the more chance that one will go off, either accidentally or intentionally.
And what is the future of a faith voice in this then? What is the future role of a Christian voice in the whole debate, as well as the specific of here in the UK?
So I think around the world, Christians are waking up in a way that they haven't necessarily done before to issues that we're facing. For example, 25 years ago, climate change was not a mainstream issue within the church globally. Now it is a huge issue that Christians are praying about and campaigning on, and that's absolutely right. I think Christians are also beginning to see issues of war and peace as not something to be left to organizations or armies or governments, but actually it is something that we are called to be involved in. It is something that we are called to pray about. Jesus was very clear that we are to shape society and we are to be countercultural. And when the prevailing culture is one of accepting weapons, of accepting militarism, of accepting war, I believe Christians have a duty to stand up and be a voice for peace. And actually, what Christian CND is about, as much as anything, is just to encourage Christians to think about these issues. Perhaps, many Christians that are listening to this might not even realize that we still have nuclear weapons in this country. Certainly, when I tell people that Christian CND is celebrating 60 years, the most common response is, "Oh, are they still going? I thought this would all finished." But actually, we are still going and we're growing. The church in the UK is growing, and I think this is something that we really need to find our voice on.
And if you want to find out more about the stance, whether you agree with it or not, as Russell says, the key point here is that we think about it, that we talk about it, that we're willing to engage with the topic, isn't it? Because if we simply turn a blind eye to it, if we simply bury our heads in the sand, the danger is that we drift to a place where suddenly we wake up and we are unhappy and wonder, how on earth did we get here? Well, by not engaging in conversation, that's how we end up in those sorts of places. So have a look at the website for yourself, christiancnd.org.uk. You can find out much more detail about what Russell has been saying, and indeed the detail of that hymn I mentioned at the beginning, the special hymn that's been written to celebrate 60 years of Christian CND. And why not get in touch with me and let me know what you think about this? Email paul@ucb.co.uk. Russell Whiting from Christian CND. Thank you for joining us.